Damn, son, where'd you find this?
People don't be offended by the truth. They be offended because you called out the truth. Simple as that. They don't want to hear any other narrative that makes them look bad.
One thing I can't stand at this big grown age is somebody who act like cause and effect does not exist. Like, yes, your actions caused this outcome. Yes, what you did lit the match. Like, why are you surprised and playing victim?
Guys, Chico, they never lied.
That's how you know somebody doesn't respect you. They listen to reply, not to be understood. They cut you off. They minimize what actually matters to you. They laugh at your boundaries, and then they call you sensitive when you try to hold the line. They show up late. They cancel last minute, forget the things you've told them, because in their world, your time, your energy, even your voice aren't a priority. They're just an option. You see, there are two kinds of people. Those who adjust when they realize they've actually hurt you, and those who expect you to adjust so they don't have to change. You don't need to be disrespected loudly to be disrespected deeply. Sometimes you'll see it. It's just in their tone, in their patterns, in the silence after you're known. Respect isn't what they say when they're watching. It's how they act when they think you'll tolerate it.
Yo, 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 yo. Sound check, sound check, sound check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Gotcha, gotcha. Peace and blessings. Glory, praise, and honor to the Most High. Happy Friday, good people. How's everybody doing? Quick shout out to everybody in the building. Thank you for being here. See the title. It goes a little deeper than just the title itself, but the messenger is a part of it. Shout outs to my poets, writers, content creators. Shout outs to Sydney. Shout outs to Coach. Shout outs to having another day on this planet where we can actually sit down and have this Discord. Do me a solid. Let the people know that we are on. We got to break this one down. There's not enough respect on these type of conversations. So I'm going to go ahead and bring everybody up, and we're going to chop it up. Coach Sydney, good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello.
So Kevin Gates goes on Club Shannon Sharpe's platform, and he's having a conversation. And in this particular one, he speaks about some things that doesn't really get a lot of respect on it. And it's usually because, well, men aren't supposed to have these type of conversations. So what I want to do is bring this up on the big screen. I'm going to let him get his bars off. We're going to chop it up. Shout outs to Arcana in the building. Hollywood Arcana is in the building. Let's get this up on the big screen real quick.
I saw that you did an interview with Mike Tyson, and you revealed for the first time, you never revealed this before, that you were sexually assaulted.
Yeah, I was sexually victimized.
Were you a teenager at the time?
Yes, sir.
Were you threatened?
When?
Did he, if you tell anybody that this has happened, or she, If you tell anybody that this happened, something might happen to you or
He
someone.
did.
He did.
Yeah, he out of here.
I guess I'll leave that alone.
I mean, that's the truth. I mean, I don't know how he, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, you don't know how?
He out of here.
Like I said, we'll move that along.
Yeah, he'll never do that to anybody again. But I think my snapping point was, damn, I hate to say who it was, but he pulled me to the side. He a monster too. He pulled me to the side. He was like, hey, are we gay? I said, I don't know. I don't know. And I remember that was the last time I kind of had a little bit of like, before it went black. I don't respect those that pick on the weak. I hate what happened, but at the end of the day, it's beautiful because my pain turned into my purpose and I'm healing the world through that. And like I say, that person, he stretched. So
damn, Kev, you said like you proud of that.
I am. The fuck?
Kev.
You touch a kid, you're supposed to die. Straight up. You rape a woman, you're supposed to die. Straight up.
Kev, but that's not your purpose. That's not your
Who?
I thought we were gonna let him handle that.
Who? Boy, God ain't put me here to be. God give me the strength to make sure this nigga, man, I'm gonna stand over and give him everything I got. God, please let him be stretched. Because sometimes you give him everything you got, and they, you know, God don't take his hand off him. But if God take his hand off him, that feet going up in that air.
You get relief from that? You feel you...
What? If somebody molests my daughter, you gonna die. Or I'm gonna die trying. But I'm very resourceful.
You're resourceful.
Unfortunately. But if you touch one of my children, you're gonna die.
I saw that you did an interview with Mike Tyson, and you revealed for the first time. You never revealed this before that you...
Initial thoughts on the video, Sydney. How you feeling after hearing that?
I resonate with some of what he said. Granted, I don't take as strong of a feeling towards it. Like, I don't think necessarily that you should have to die if you do that. However, that's not saying I'm condoning that behavior whatsoever. I do know that, especially for underaged individuals that commit these acts, I'm pretty sure, just from what he said, that was probably an adult that did that. But I know for younger people that commit that, usually they're doing this because they experience some form of abuse themselves. Very often perpetrators become perpetrators because they were formerly victims themselves. That was the case that I experienced when I was in school. I was assaulted by a classmate who had been assaulted by another classmate who had been assaulted by his dad. And that kid, assaulted by his dad, ended up doing that to at least 3 other students that I know of in that classroom. And so that's a very, at least in my life, a very poignant example. I don't know if that's the right word, but a very obvious example of the generational curse, if you want to call it that, even though it wasn't necessarily generational, but it just shows you the path of trauma and how it really passes on to other people, almost in the same way that a normal illness does. So I don't necessarily think that as strongly as he did, but I do definitely understand that feeling, because when you are exposed to violence in that form, it does a lot to you. I was very lucky in that it didn't extend beyond like tactile behavior. I was fortunate to not have been exposed to anything more severe than that. But some people are very, very unfortunate to have to experience the very severe forms of that type of trauma. Yes, I see the pasta. So I can understand that, because I just the little bit that I experienced did immense damage to my mental health. It took me over 10 years to be able to come to terms with what happened to me and start healing myself. And it still, even though I'm mostly healed from it, it still does have repercussions. I can't even imagine, just from knowing documentaries and my own research, like I know the extent of what some people can feel after more severe situations, but I can't imagine having to experience that myself. So I can understand that sentiment of wanting nothing but malice and vengeance for that person. But yeah, I also, I don't remember if he actually said this in the video or if it was, I was reading up on it. He said that he has taught his own children to like come to him and be open with him. And I think that's, we could probably talk about this more later, but I think that's an important thing to pass down to your children if you do experience something like this, is because I think that's really what causes the most amount of trauma for people, is if they do not have an outlet to reach out about what they just experienced and have someone to talk to about the abuse that they had to be exposed to.
Coach, what's the word?
1 in 6 men experience sexual abuse in their lifetime.
I'm torn between, was this a safe space for him to have that conversation? You know, I don't know what it is about Shannon Sharpe's platform where people just go up there and they pour their heart and soul out there on that platform. I don't know if it's because it's him specifically, but I appreciate the honesty. I appreciate the transparency. I don't know how much of it was just him wanting to share that with the people, but I'm glad he brought it up. You say 1 in 6. That is a big number. It might not seem like that to a lot of people. That is a huge number. And I can say I'm 1 of 6. I can say I'm 1 of 6. So I already know how that feels. It's not what people think it is. Everybody handles it differently. And I think that's why I wanted to talk about it specifically, not just simply because of him and what he said about, you know, responding to it, but because we do have this problem. There are men out here who has been destroyed mentally by this, and some people have never recovered or come out of it. So,
Sid, mute your mic.
I just wanted to add on to that, just for people to think about, and that's reported. 1 in 6 men report having that happen. So that doesn't factor in the people that never tell anybody about something that they experienced, or people who have those experiences but don't understand what they've experienced is abuse. So the number could technically be higher.
first question. Why aren't these conversations being discussed enough? I'm speaking about men specifically, boys specifically. We already know women go through this, and I'm not condoning it. It's not acceptable. But why don't we talk about this in the manosphere, generally speaking? Why isn't this in circulation?
I mean, we've already stated the obvious. toxic masculinity. People don't discuss it, cultural norms. I think we're at the end of that point where people aren't talking about it. I think we're in a point right now where it's not necessarily about vulnerability, but I think it's people are just in the era of exposing people. So that might be the way some people are going about healing, and hurt people. So the conversation is starting to come up. It's just not controlled in a controlled environment. You asked if Shannon Sharpe was a safe space. I would say no. He specifically say that he opens up. He's not an interviewer. He's just having a conversation. And he specifically said that after Cat Williams' show, that he just allows people to come up there and have a conversation and just be candid. So there's no fact checking. There's no anything. So I wouldn't necessarily say it was a safe space, but it was a space to have a conversation. And there's a difference, So you got to make sure that we understand that. And then just talking about current norms and discouraging expressions of pain and trauma, and then just, trauma, weakness, men, ego, all those things can't necessarily coexist at the same time. So it just depends on who you're talking to and their maturity level.
Yeah, historically, it's been very looked down upon for men to be emotionally expressive, to express trauma, to show any form of weakness in public, because men have over generations have been expected to show strong behavior, and to not show feminine behavior, and like crying and showing emotions and being open about really horrible things is considered to be more feminine. It's considered to be like you're complaining, you're whining, you're expressing things that don't need to be out in the open. Like, keep that to yourself. Just be strong. Just hide the things that you're struggling with. I think there's also an element of even the people that wanted to talk about it and had not been conditioned to think that way, they still might not have, because of the way society will treat you, look at you for talking in that way, talking about those things. There's a fear of like being harassed or made fun of, being seen differently, seen poorly because of your decision to discuss stuff like that. And I think a subset of the population too feels like admitting they've been abused would emasculate them, because they're in this like hypersexual society. It's seen as like, well, especially if it was another woman. This is coming from a documentary that I've seen on this. If it's another woman that, or if it's a woman that had done that to them, they can sometimes be shamed. Like, well, why didn't you enjoy it? Like, why didn't you participate? Like, you should have been happy that you got that experience. And like, you should have been proud to be involved with an older woman or whatever. And so they're almost, in some frames of mind, they're almost conditioned to be okay with it just because it was seen as a sexual encounter. So I think there's a lot of reasons why it's not discussed in wider circles. But I think a lot of it has to do with how society has traditionally viewed masculinity. That's why women have had an easier time getting sympathy and getting support in public spheres than men have, because of the way that we've traditionally seen men and how they're supposed to act.
Chingy got accused of sleeping with a transgender woman. His career went down the toilet. It wasn't even true, but people saw the allegations, the picture, even the guy cosplaying as a woman admitted that they lied, but perception mattered more to the general public. And it was like, well, you like men, so that makes you gay by default. So we can't be associated with you. Career over. But you fast forward to 2026, they shoving it down your throat. They forcing you to like it. It's more acceptable. And I brought that up to say, Coach, I got a question. Now I guess either or can answer this. Are these type of conversations meant for the internet? Can they be facilitated properly right here or in studio with somebody who is qualified to do it and still have the same outcome or effect that it would if it wasn't Shannon Sharpe in that seat?
Which conversations? Because you started out talking about transgenders.
Well, the transgender part, I was speaking about the fact that Sydney and you brought up two different things that were similar. They condemned Chingy for allegedly being with someone of the same gender. What Sydney just said was, well, you're going to get emasculated if you've been touched on or you have some type of phobia from being assaulted by an adult. And my point was the perception of it, not directly the fact that the person is transgender, is the perception of it. People will look at it and say, oh, well, you're gay for this, without having the facts, without knowing what the hell they talking about. Or you're so childlike. It's like, all right, well, something happened to me. Why is that funny? Why is that something to joke about? Why are you trying to harass or tease a person or exclude them from the societal standards or kick them out of the group because something happened to them? Which brings me back in full circle to, all right, well, shit, if perception is really the issue here, then is there a possibility that you can have this same conversation about men being in these vulnerable states online or in studio with someone who is qualified to have the conversation? Can it still be successful up here, or should it just not be on camera at all?
Yeah, I mean, you can have a conversation anywhere with mature people that are capable of having a conversation. So, I mean, yeah, I guess I'm kind of confused. You can talk about whatever you want to talk about as long as the audience is educated enough and mature enough to be able to comprehend and understand the topic that you're trying to engage in. I mean, the number one thing as a speaker is knowing your audience. So if you don't know your audience and you don't think your audience is capable of receiving that message, then you probably shouldn't be speaking to that audience. So those are things you should be checking prior to and not get caught up in the thing. And that Chingy thing was 20 something years ago, and the environment was completely different. You know, there's been so many different instances since then, you know, leading up to now. Now you got whole groups and organizations and stuff that are formed to speak on behalf of those people. So they're kind of not the same thing, but I understand what you're saying. But, you know, times have changed. And then, so now rights have changed. I mean, so many things have changed and evolved since then, of him getting caught up in the video and then being shunned against. Because even since then, you've had between the likes of Eddie Murphy, Johnny Gill, Mr. C out of New York, you know, I mean, all these other guys and gentlemen, Buck, young Buck out there, 50 was, you know, talking about him. And these people weren't necessarily shunned. They were just kind of looked at differently, but it just shows you how times have changed and how each situation has kind of been handled differently. But at the same time, at the end of the day, you know, again, it just depends on the intent behind it.
Frankly, I think the internet is at this point the best place to have these conversations, because with news media, they're so focused on ratings and appeasing like viewers and not causing complaints and stuff, that you probably wouldn't be able to get very far, because they not allow you to talk about certain things and ban certain words, bans certain ideas from coming up. They really like water down the conversation. And then I can't really see this being an in-person, like we're going to pay to go to a venue and talk about this type of stuff, because I can't really see people voluntarily paying to go in person to listen to somebody have a discussion like that. So I feel like internet is the place to have these discussions, because that's one, nowadays, this is where people go for their information, for their entertainment, for everything. I'll get to that, but it has the platforms available to us to have these discussions. It has the ability to have interface with the public that are watching it. And you can really, I mean, with exception to the policies of whatever website you're using, you can pretty much talk about anything. You can be as open as you need to be. The only thing that you have to keep in mind is that you want to be as factual and respectful as possible, because if you're addressing something as powerfully harmful and stressful as abuse like that, you have to be very tactful of the people that have suffered through that. You do not want to stoop to the level of making fun of people that went through that, or minimizing what happened. You want to make sure that you're offering resources to people so they know what to do, how to follow up, where to find help if they've experienced these things, or if they're in the middle of experiencing things like this. And additionally, the internet, because of the way the algorithm works, because of the way like it connects things, it is really the best place to put out this information too, because a lot of the time when people experience these types of abuse, the first place they do go is to the internet, because a lot of people are not comfortable with approaching a parent, a friend, a doctor, whatever, to say like, hey, I'm experiencing this. The first place they go is going to be the internet to look up, is what happened to me normal? Is this wrong? What do I do? I remember that myself. Like when I first experienced what I experienced, I didn't even know that it was wrong. Like I was only 11 or 12 at the time, and I didn't understand really anything about like sex and everything. And I was looking up stuff like, can I get pregnant from being touched? Like, I had no clue how to even talk to anybody about that. And so most of my information from the beginning came straight from the internet. I didn't tell my mom until I was in high school, I believe. I didn't tell therapists about it until I was in college. So by putting these conversations out there, when people start doing that research, they'll be able to access those conversations. They'll be able to see it and see how other people feel, and see that there is support out there, that there are people who care and have information available, resources available. So I think it is important to have this stuff up on the internet, especially for men, because men are very like women. We're taught like, yeah, talk, share, reach out, talk to people. But men are taught to keep it in, to ignore your feelings, to not let anyone know that you're feeling these things, to pretend that your problems don't exist, even from their own families. So having that available to men, showing them that it's okay to be open about stuff like that is very, very important, because sexual abuse is one of the precursors that make people more likely to kill themselves. And a lot of the time when people do that, it's because they feel like they have nothing else to do. They have nowhere to turn, no one to talk to. And so they think the only way is to take their own lives. So having this information out there and available to anybody who's looking at this information is very, very important, not just for the like helping your mind get over and find ways to recover from what you went through, but to also show people that they're not alone and that there are things they can do to help themselves, and there are people they can reach out to that will not shame them for what they went through.
One thing to think about is they say when you actually go through that trauma, your brain stops processing and you don't move, you don't grow. So if you experience that trauma at 9 or 10 years old, then you're probably psychologically going to stay at 9 or 10 years old until you heal from that trauma. And so that's why you have a lot of people walking around and this is where when you say, well, you're an adult, you're supposed to know. And it's like, wait, you can't say that. The reason why you can't say stuff like that, you're supposed to know at this age, you should know, because if they went through some trauma at some point and they didn't heal or seek any help, and psychologically, they probably hadn't processed past that age of when they exhibited that trauma. Go ahead.
I was just about to ask this following question, kind of ties into what you just said. What kind of visible or internal damage do men go through after this has happened to them? And you already kind of alluded to one part of it. They stay in that one little space. Is like and I think we covered this before, where you try to hide behind it or you use it as a comfort zone or something like that. I can't remember word for word.
Not comfort, but coping.
Right.
Yeah, coping. And you also, so the issues that you have, man, is you great point. You said physical and internal, and obviously you can't see the internal, and that's the stuff that you want to be leery of, because the physical, it can always be perceived as something else, projecting, and typically it's going to be projecting the internal. And so the internal is definitely, what you have to look out for. And it's about knowing that individual, because I can give you all kinds of symptoms and signs, but you have to know that individual, and you have to notice when those patterns change. Because here we go, right? We go back to talking about patterns again. And so you watch the type of patterns that people, they go through and they make. And then when they make those drastic patterns, and typically, like Sid mentioned about, unaliving yourself, certain things people do when they say patterns, they'll say giving away their most beloved items. They'll, talk about things that they never talked about before, or talk about no longer being around, past tense, and they're still in the present. So different things of that nature. But, when it starts to come to, different types of abuse, you may not necessarily see it, because it may be something that they're doing or they're exhibiting during or the lack of sexual activities. And that's the tricky part, because typically what they're abused in, is they won't go out and create another situation or scenario. It'll kind of be similar or content to the same one that they kind of already went through. So those are the things that you want to just kind of be observant to. Is, I don't want to say abnormal behaviors, but knowing the person that you're around is watching out for those type of behaviors. And then it's also about being inquisitive, asking questions. You got to ask questions, because people aren't just going to volunteer that type of information, and they have to be vulnerable if they want to share it. And then you have to establish that type of relationship with somebody to make them feel comfortable enough, as you mentioned earlier, that safe space, right? So, so again, it's just about knowing, asking questions, establishing a relationship. And that's why it's important to know the people that you're with as well, because how else are you going to know if they're going through something if you don't know the changes that they're going through? And it can be subtle changes, but everybody's routine based, and they get caught up in patterns every day, from waking up, working out, going to school, going to work, going to do whatever, coming back home. And, it's so redundant. They used to make commercials called up, and they would call every day getting up to go make the donuts. You know what I mean? So they talk about the type of patterns that people display every day. So just getting aware with the type of patterns of the people that you're around, and just paying attention, being a people watcher, observer.
Yeah, there's a whole gamut of effects that can happen. Different people will internalize the impacts different ways. And there's a whole spectrum. Like some people that experience abuse become hypersexual, and some people become antisexual and avoid any sort of physical contact with people. It can even show up in very subtle ways that might not even appear as symptoms to people that know the child. Like they can start getting sick more often or have a lot of like physical body complaints. They might stop performing well in school, stop showing up at school, skip school, have difficulty concentrating. They might have gaps in their memory. They can have changes to their mood where they either become more withdrawn or way more boisterous than normal. Have like regressive behaviors, as Coach said, it can make you kind of stay at an earlier childlike state, and it can even make you like even go backwards developmentally in terms of like your mental state. It can cause sleeping problems, eating disorders. Very frequently, it'll change your self-esteem, your self-outlook. It can cause depression, nightmares, self-harming behavior. In long-term, untreated situations, it can eventually lead to issues in the bedroom. It can cause post-traumatic stress disorder, inability to create relationships, issues with your identity, issues with your parents. It can cause issues with how you interact with people around you. And later in life, it can cause somebody to turn to substance abuse, alcohol abuse, or even develop like criminal behavior, violent behavior, because of all of the stuff that's going on in their mind. It very much depends person to person, as well as the extent of the abuse that they had to go through. So it does very much depend child to child, and even like abuse on a child is going to be different than abuse on an adult. That can still happen. A lot of people are like, oh, it can't happen to adults. It can definitely happen to adults, but it will show up differently in children versus adults. However, one of the most common links is self-harming behavior, a change in your personality, and a change in your social structure, how you interact with people. So if you are seeing this in your child, this is definitely something that, number one, you should be talking to your child. You should be trying to figure out what's happening. You have to be very, you can't be pushy with it. You do have to be very patient with them to let them come out with it, because if they feel like you're like interrogating them, that's not going to go well. Personal experience. But talk to them, and right away get started with connecting with psychologists and a doctor for your child as well, because that is going to be something that's necessary for any child that goes through a situation like that. And then if you see this in a friend or another adult, again, similar to a child, but slightly different, you obviously don't want to pry. You only want to let them know, hey, if something's going on, know you can talk to me. Know I'm here for you. I'm an open, free space for you to communicate if you feel comfortable with it. Adults is definitely different, because you can't really force them to tell you something that they don't want to, but you at least let them know that they have somebody that will support them no matter what they're going to share with you. But yeah, going back to the symptoms, there's a lot of different ways that this can manifest in somebody, and not all of them are going to be overtly visible. And a lot of the time, people who are going through those situations are trying to hide. They don't want to let people know that something is wrong, and so they will pretend that nothing is wrong. But obviously, as a parent, you're probably going to start noticing some of the signs start to trickle out. So it's important to know your child and be as tactful as possible if you do start noticing any of these signs.
Hey, real quick, let me just, because we touched a lot on the kids. I just want to say that it's important to understand that in relationships, right? This is why it's important to know people, because if you're in a relationship with somebody who's been through a traumatic experience or a sexual experience or was abused, like she said, that they can withdraw within the relationship and not engage sexually or be overly sexual active. It also can be something that births that narcissistic personality, because what happens is now you want to be in control because you haven't you have anxiety, you have something that you haven't gotten over yet, and so now you feel like you have to be in control of every situation, and so now you become manipulative. And you asked about signs, so those are some of the signs or red flags that you can see in relationships. And we talk about it, that we don't talk about these type of things enough. So both narcissistic in both male and female. So both, you know, from the woman being narcissistic to the man, which is what you're seeing a lot of now. 90s, 2000s, women were overly sexualized and not necessarily deemed as being as important. And then they went through an era where now we're taking our sexy back. We're becoming more educated. We're becoming more career or goal and oriented and minded. And they adapt that narcissistic personality. And then it's hard to be in relationships because you haven't gotten over prior abuse that you've gone through, over sexualization. And now you just want to be in control and you're not even willing to compromise within a relationship. So those are also some things that people inadvertently won't even think about, but affect them. And then the other thing was the child going through something can definitely resent the parents. And the parents won't even know it. Because like Sid just mentioned, if the parents are unaware of it and they go to the internet or via someone else to have that conversation, so you got to make sure those channels and those lines of communication are open with those kids, because those type of things can be happening, and sleepovers are happening at your house. Sleepovers when you allow them to go to somebody else's home, whatever the case may be, and you will never know anything different because they're going on social media, MD, Google, Gemini, and all these other damn things that they have access to and can no contact and cut you out of the process via farther rec. So you have to be engaged and you have to understand what's going on in totality, as how this can affect and how it may be affecting relationships that whoever's watching these videos are currently in. They don't even know what's going on.
There's a video that I scroll by. I didn't even bother to save it because it was that disturbing, and it touched on both of your parts, like literally. She got on Instagram.
You can't say parts when we're talking about disturbing and touching.
I know. I just thought about that shit. Yeah, poor choice of words. Shit. It's probably still floating on Instagram though. She was very, very blunt. She was way worse than what he said. She said, "Look, man, I confuse love and lust. I can have sex with you and not love you, or I can love you." And it's like the way that she worded that shit, I was like, that, bro, that shit sounds so accurate to everything that's been said here. Like, and then you look at this man's track record. He had side chicks. He married Brittany Renner, was only with her for a couple of months, but he was still dealing with other people in the same breath. He's giving out all this type of relationship advice. He's polyamorous and this, that, and the third. Then I go back to that video of her, and it's like, yeah. And then, I mean, even just from a personal aspect, yeah, it can make you overly sexual, or it could just kind of numb you to it and make you feel like you got to have some type of control. Like, because there was something taken from you, something pure, something innocent was taken from you. And how do you get it back? You don't think the same no more, because somebody just took advantage of you and took you out of that space where I'm supposed to be a kid. Now I'm 24, 25, 30 years old, and I suck at relationships. I don't know how to operate in a house with another person. I kind of got these awkward things going on with me, and it's like, all right, how do I open up and say I have an issue? And then you brought up just being in a relationship with someone. How do you have that conversation with someone? How do you open up to somebody and let the chips fall where they may? Because it's not about them, it's about you freeing yourself from it. You know,
Listen, man. Listen. At some point, and this is like Sia kind of mentioned with the Don Lemon thing. You know, the further we go to the right, the further this starts to become another or part two of a conversation. Because what happens is we just, and this is what I kind of talked to you about briefly, but in the past, you got an onion. Right now, we're peeling back layers. And then what's going to happen in another 18 minutes is you're going to leave a cliffhanger, and then it's going to be like, man, some stuff that people really need to talk about. Because what happens, man, is in these relationships is exactly what everybody said, is you start to identify, okay, the tangible issues that we just talked about. And so then you start to question yourself. And then so now it becomes counseling. It becomes counseling for both of us, for you, for me. You know what I mean? And then what happens is you meeting people where they are. So you may be at different levels, because I always like to use the sliders, right? So you can, the typical thing, it goes in the middle. To the left is the least that you like, and to the right is what you like the most, or whatever the case may be. And you kind of go back and forth. But as you start to identify these things, people aren't going to be open-minded to this shit. They're going to be offended. Now the question comes out, you think you know everything. You think this, you think that. So now you're introducing new dynamics, right? So it's not that I think I know everything. It could be that essentially I care enough that I did some research into some of the symptoms that you have. So it becomes about how do you have this conversation? You know what I mean? And then how you have the conversation is it comes with honesty and just transparency, because there's going to be issues, and there's going to be reoccurring issues. So it's not like you're just going to be sitting around like, well, shit, what's wrong with you today? You know what I mean? There's going to be issues. And the issues are going to be, you keep arguing or fighting or having a conversation about a topic that keeps arising, and there's no resolution. So now what happens is we start to talk about the present day and age of people that we have. We got people that cut people off. We got people that say, I'm in my healing stage, and they don't know any of the steps to healing other than liking memes and sharing them, right? Okay, I'm in a new version of me. I'm in my fuck the world. It's all about me. I'm in my soft girl era. You can pick whichever thing out there that you want to pick, but none of that has anything to do with healing. And so then as you're in that situation, you should be asking yourself and self-evaluating and saying, how is this helping both of us or one of us? Because if you can't, because we're still speaking about relationships, but you're trying to help each other out. But at the end of the day, it always goes back to the airline when nobody pays attention to the stewardess when she says, put your mask on first before you try to help anybody else. So you got to make sure you're doing your part and you're not contributing to anything that's provoking, agitating, or triggering their traumas. Now, how would you know that? Right? So now you got to be a therapist, a chaplain, and everything all in one. So it depends, again, on how you're trying to have those conversations, and those when you might need to result in contacting the subject matter expert, because it might be a little bit outside of your depth.
I think it also depends to what degree you are affected at the time that you get in that relationship, because some people are going to be way more affected than other people. For example, when I was in high school, I got in a relationship with somebody, and I was still in the midst of trying to come to terms with what happened. And I still remember this to this day. They came to give me a side hug, and they brushed my side, and I like never talked to them again because I didn't know how to voice any of the things that I was feeling, and I didn't know how to communicate with them like, hey, I'm not comfortable with being touched right now because of my past. And I didn't really have that strong of a connection with them enough for me to like know even how to broach the subject. So I just was like, all right, peace out, I'm done. However, with my husband, like when we met, I don't remember exactly when I told him about it, but I do know like we had the conversation. I told him what happened. I told him the whole situation. But part of the reason why I was attracted to him and stayed with him and got with him is the first time we hung out with each other, and he stayed at my place. He didn't try and make any moves on me at all, and he made me feel comfortable. And I'm like, okay, cool, I'm with somebody who's not going to try and like pressure me into situations that I'm uncomfortable with. Like I've been in those situations where the guy is like, you can tell he's trying to pressure you into get it, like, oh, just sit next to me, like, oh, can I touch your leg, like, no. So when you get into these relationships, one, you really have to know yourself. You have to know what your own limits are. If you're not comfortable being with somebody, don't try to force yourself to, because that's only going to make it worse. You're going to feel guilty, you're going to feel bad, you're going to feel a whole gamut of feelings because you can't give them what you want to or whatever. So you have to really understand yourself, your boundaries, what you need before you even get in that relationship in the first place. That was something that killed some of my relationships early on, is because I didn't even understand what my own limits were. I just was like, oh, I want a relationship. And then I realized that I couldn't do that. I couldn't follow through with that. And so once I finally understood myself and understood the trauma, and a lot of that feeling went away, I was a lot more comfortable, number one, approaching that subject, explaining what happened, and knowing how I can help them help me. Because you do kind of have to, as an adult, really, I mean, even as like teenager, you have to give them something, like, here are the things not to do with me. Because sometimes if you don't really understand what your limits are, you can get really aggro and you just like yell at the person like, I told you not to touch me. And they're just like, I didn't know, like, I'm sorry. So you do have to have a sense of self-understanding to give them what your boundaries are. And that also simultaneously will help you understand who's worth giving your time to, because if they're willing to respect those boundaries, that's a good person, theoretically. So yeah, in relationships, it very much depends on the partner you're with, how you want to approach it. But you should, if you're going to be intimate with that person and you know your past is going to affect that intimacy, it is definitely a conversation you'll want to have with that person, just so they understand where you're at, and again, what your boundaries are, how you feel about it, what not to do, what to do. And yeah, so it is important to have those conversations, but again, you do kind of have to adjust it to who you're with, how long you've been together. Obviously, you don't want to start off the date like, hey, by the way, when I was 9, like that. You'll at least want to get to know the person first and give yourself a chance to like acclimate to the relationship. But once you're broaching the topic of like, we're going to start doing things, again, if you know that that's a thing with you, let them know, have that conversation. You don't have to give them all the gory details, but just like tell them that this thing happened to you and it affects you in such and such ways. Also, just a side note, since I was thinking about it, I highly advocate for EMDR, which is, I always forget, eye movement, something. I forgot the full acronym, but it's a form of reprocessing that you basically work with a therapist, and they kind of walk you through that situation and help you turn all of those memories into memories that feel more supportive, so that like in a nutshell, they walk with you through the situation that you went through, and while you're doing that, they also have you visualize having people there that care about you, that are there to support you, saying things to you that will help you. And I did that myself, and it made a tremendous difference for me, and especially with like my sensory issues that came out of that situation. I got it done in college, but it is one that I highly suggest, if it's, especially if like physical or memories are really like plaguing your sense of safety. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that one in there because that made, what I was saying made me think of that. But yeah, have a supportive partner and friends, and people who you can actually talk to about this type of stuff.
My final thoughts. Holding in that type of trauma is a snare. It's not for nobody else but yourself. It's extremely difficult to break out of, but you'll thank yourself for doing it. We're too judgmental. We're not perfect creatures, and everybody is not going to look at what you're doing as honorable. And you got a bunch of grown adults who still think they're in high school, and when they hear that as a man you got these things going on and you need help, they're not going to meet you where you are. That's okay. Everybody is not going to meet you where you are. It's not for them to meet you where they are. You're doing it for yourself. There's some shackles, some things that you need to break off you in order for you to progress and get better. In order for you to do that, you got to be willing to be honest with yourself. Now, however you decide to go about it, I would like to believe that you would go to somebody that you trust, or put yourself in the best position to open up to someone that's going to allow you to do it as freely as possible. Let your message be a testimony. Let it be a starting point for someone else who's going through it. Because it's about you, but it's about so much more. It's deeper than just you breaking a cycle or a habit. Because there's others, they're just waiting for someone to say, all right, yeah, it was me too. I thought I thought something was wrong with me. The only thing that's wrong with you is not having the right opportunity and moment to address what's going on. But everybody's timing is different. Then that's fine. But you don't want to keep bleeding on other people. That's what's most important here. So I encourage you to be don't be ashamed of what happened. It's not your fault. It's okay to say, yeah, this is me, because none of us are perfect. And I hope and pray this conversation at least helps you a little bit more build confidence to have that discussion wherever you decide. If anybody want to add anything before we close out, the floor is yours.
Go ahead, Sid.
I just wanted to say that for anyone that is experiencing any form of this, whether it was in their past or even now, know that it's not your fault. This can happen to anyone. As we said earlier, 1 in 2 women will encounter this in their lifetime. 1 in 6, or possibly more men will encounter stuff like this in their lifetime. So do not blame yourself for this. It is not your fault if somebody made the decision to do whatever they did to you. And know that there are people out there that will help you. Your life is so worth living, despite the things that you might have to go through. I promise you, it is worth pushing past it. It seems really difficult. There's so much that goes on in your head after this type of stuff happens, and you might have a fear of like being around people or being touched or whatever, and you might think that you won't be able to move forward and have a good life after this. But I promise you, it does get easier with time. As someone who's been through it before, it is a hill to climb, but I promise you that you will start to feel better. You just have to make sure that you seek out the right resources, people who are willing to support you and understand your situation without harassing you or shaming you or making you feel like it was your fault, because again, it was not your fault. So my heart goes out to anyone that has had to go through a situation like that. Yeah, I understand where you've been, and I just pray for you and hope that the future is brighter for you.
And with that being said, good conversation tonight, folks. Salutes to everybody who pulled up for the show. Appreciate y'all. I hope you enjoy your weekends. Stay safe, stay warm. Do me a solid before you go.
Push the goddamn button.
Peace.